me. But
All
we
right.
were talking in the chat at the break, and if you want to get in on that chat, ESPN 1320 TV, you can hang out in the chatty house, youtube.com/ESPN 1320 or twitch.tv/ESPN 1320. That's where you can reach us in the chatty house. And we talk through the breaks. We hang out during the break. We answer questions. And frankly, the chatty house sometimes asks some really good questions that we bring to air. And that's one we're going to do right now. So I am not ham in the chat declared that Zach LaVine will not be a king. And we've talked pretty extensively about Zach LaVine, and I definitely want to get your thoughts on this. But for me, the whole Zach LaVine thing, I think what it would take to go get Zach LaVine from an asset standpoint, you could probably go get probably 2, maybe 3 lower caliber players who improve your roster more than Zach LaVine would.
Oh, for sure. I mean, financially, we're talking about a guy who makes $200 million over like the next 4 years.
Yeah,
Like,
just you're locking yourself into Zach LaVine as a member of your core for the next half decade.
yeah, I don't understand in any world where like Zach LaVine to the Kings makes sense. I just don't. Like, he's not a super efficient scorer. He's never won at all. Like, the fact that he's fun and he's highlight reel and he gets buckets, okay. Like, there are a lot of guys like that out there in the league, and
1,000%.
this guy gets paid a lot to shoot 33.6% from 3. You know, that's not exactly what you're looking for. And for me, it's, if you're going to add that type of offensive weapon, then add it on the front line.
Yep.
Don't add it in the backcourt. In the backcourt, like, I think everyone, you can look at like what's happening with Trae Young, right? Trae Young has played alongside Kevin Huerter. He's played alongside Bogdan Bogdanovic. He's played alongside DeJounte Murray. They just keep like wheeling and dealing through these guys that they believe can help Trae Young as a player, and they keep losing. And what they haven't done is done something basic like what the Philadelphia 76ers did with Allen Iverson. Like, Eric Snow did all of the dirty work. He held down, he rebounded, he played defense, he got everyone involved, he kept the team together. He hit a 16-foot jumper, but that was about it. He was so valuable to the Philadelphia 76ers. Like, why haven't they tried that next to Trae Young?
I have no idea.
And so when I look at De'Aaron Fox, first of all, I'll say De'Aaron Fox fits next to a lot of players. He's not such a like this crazy megalomaniac scorer guy that he can't fit alongside people. He fit perfectly fine alongside Buddy Hield. He fit perfectly fine alongside Bogdan Bogdanovic. And the one player that he really didn't fit alongside was Tyrese Halliburton. Again, you didn't give it long enough, but also you could see that it might not work because you had one guy who needs to orchestrate everything and one guy who needs the ball in his hands to score. And so that's not exactly conducive to building a team. Now, we've seen, again, Fox work with Huerter. Fox is probably going to work just fine with Chris Duarte, but Chris Duarte is more like that Doug Christie or Eric Snow type player that you run out there, that does the dirty work, that mixes it up, that goes and gets some rebounds, that gets a couple of assists, that might have like 6 or 7, 8 shots a game, but that's it. As long as he's fitting into that role, I think he can flourish, and I think it makes Kings better.
Yeah.
So
and that's not to say that Chris Duarte is a better player than Zach LaVine in a vacuum. He's not.
Or even better than Kevin Huerter.
No. If you're acquiring Zach LaVine, it's because he puts the ball in the hoop in so many different ways.
Yeah.
He's a ridiculous athlete. He can fill it up from outside. Like, he's a very, very good scorer. But when you look at the Kings and you look at their needs, that's not it. Putting him next to De'Aaron Fox is either handcuffing Fox or handcuffing LaVine.
Yeah.
And that defeats the purpose of acquiring a guy like that.
No, totally.
If De'Aaron Fox is really I shouldn't say still. If De'Aaron Fox was struggling to score the basketball, if De'Aaron Fox is like, man, you know what? He is 20 points a night and they really need more from their backcourt, then okay. But that's not the case. That's not the case at all. I don't see the Zach LaVine thing outside of hey, he wants to be in Sacramento, and that's he's won dunk contests. Like, that's a big name, and landing a big name in Sacramento would be cool and different. But I don't think it helps them this year.
No. It's like the Kings have made this mistake a million times over the course of time, over the course of history. I mean, it literally is like going out and getting Derek Smith, because one of the first games that the Kings played in Sacramento, dude goes out and scores like 30-something points, and the Kings go out and trade for him, and then he blows out his knees, never the same player, like, or he had a bad knee already. Like, yeah. But it brings us...
It's real quick.
Yeah.
It's about going, and we say this once a show, at least. It's about going from good to great.
Yeah.
Acquiring Zach LaVine we haven't made the playoffs, this guy will help us get to the playoffs type of move. Zach LaVine is not this gets you to a championship caliber type of move. It's just, it's not.
Yeah, and the problem is Zach has made it to the playoffs exactly one time in his career.
And he wasn't great.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's just like he's been in the league a long time, and he's not the type of player that gets you over the hump.
Nope.
There's also this other, here in the chat, we had Greg Moss, and I'm not calling you out, Greg, I'm just saying, it plays into a different discussion here. Davion plus Herter, a future first, doesn't get the Kings Anunoby, for those wondering why the Kings didn't trade for him. This is an interesting discussion, Kyle, because everyone wants to go out there with a trade machine, and they want to work out trades. And the problem is that, like, you got to work. The trade machine at least helps with salary, right? So people out there in the world can look at it and say, okay, salary cap wise, this is how this works, right? So yeah, on paper, that the Kings have all kinds of ways to get OG Anunoby. The problem that you have is that the Raptors didn't want. It's not that they didn't want Kevin Huerter and Davion Mitchell and a first round pick. It's that they wanted to stay competitive, build around a 22-year-old Scotty Barnes. They got a 23-year-old, they got a 24-year-old, and they're building with that as their core. The Kings had that to offer, but his name is Keegan Murray, and the Kings weren't going to do it, and so they lost out. So my point isn't that the Kings had a better deal, could have given a better deal. My point is that sometimes you're trading with a team who has different motivations than what you have. And that's what we've run into here. And then I think the bigger question is that going to be the case if they decide to trade Pascal Siakam? And I'm going to say that I don't think it is. And that sounds weird, but go ahead.
So that's kind of interesting, because that's what I was going to bring up about the OG trade. Was we've talked so much about the Kings' first round picks. I know they have first round picks and they can offer these, and teams see second. There were 0 first round picks in that deal. It was Emmanuel Quickly and RJ Barrett and Detroit's second.
Yep.
Which will be
a really good second pick.
It'll be a really high second round pick.
This 31st pick in the draft.
Yeah. So back in the first round, early second round pick. So that's the only trade. That was the only pick that went in that deal, because, like you said, the Raptors clearly still want to compete.
Yep.
And draft picks don't help you do that, especially if they're draft picks in 2025 and 2027.
Well,
or later.
Yes. Yeah. So if we're talking about a 2026, 2028 pick. Okay. Now, when it comes to Siakam, I'm going to say a couple of things. Number one, Siakam makes $38 million. So Toronto is going to have to take back upwards of $32 million no matter what. And the people who make that kind of money are not a bunch of young players.
Right.
So they're going to have to take back veterans. That's number one. Number two, they already got 2 pieces to go with Barnes, and they have other pieces there already. They're probably at this next junction looking for more of the draft compensation and not bearing themselves on the long-term contracts and getting players that fit. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're looking for the exact same deal again. They only want 22, 23-year-old players.
Sure.
And if you got those players to trade them, then they're in. So, like, welcome OKC to the conversation. You have a bunch of these guys, but I don't think that you already got 2 of them. I think that they're probably going to, like, look at the build as a long-term situation and build assets because, again, OG makes so much money that you're going to have to take back veterans no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a great point. And whether that's veterans with a couple of cheaper young players attached, or an expiring with a couple of young guys attached, or maybe it's just salary match and then a bunch of picks.
Yeah.
And maybe that's where that winds up landing. But I did think, I was certain that the OG trade was going to be a player and then a bunch of picks. That was not how it went, which I thought was really, really interesting.
Yeah.
The Pascal Siakam deal is going to be fascinating now.
I think so too. I think it does. The Kings can still get in on this. They can still be players in this if they want. But remember, he makes a lot of money. And if you're Toronto and you're looking at this, you already got 3 young guys that you can build around. Could you fill out your roster with role players that actually make sense to help bring these guys along and help develop them and help, put placeholders in place and then first round picks as assets? So I think there's definitely a way that the Kings are still involved.